Special mention of the Kirtan Oasis team, who have adopted the principle of always better service. Not only are they ready to take painstaking service, which takes practically half a day to get ready for, but every time they roll out their Kirtan Oasis, it is better than the last time. So thank you to the whole team, headed by Shambhalangi, Kirtan Bihari Prabhu, the technical team. Madhava said last week it's the best sound at a Harinam that he's ever experienced. That's important. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevāya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevāya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vāsudevāya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Sri Vyasadeva, the author. Today, I'd like to, and it looks like I'm going to, read from the first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the verse today is at text 22. Does anybody know it before it comes on the screen? Too late. Ato vai kavayo nityam bhaktim paramayā mudāh vāsudeva-bhagavati purifies prasadani. 1-1. Go, go. Ato vai kavayo nityam bhaktim paramayā mudāh
vāsudeva-bhagavati purifies prasadinam.
Ato vai kavayo nityam bhaktim paramayā mudāh
vāsudeva-bhagavati
prasadani. Atah. Therefore, vai, certainly, kavayaha, all transcendentalists, nityam, from time immemorial, bhaktim, service unto the Lord, paramayā, supreme, mudāh, with great delight, vāsudeva, Shri Krishna, Bhagavati, the personality of Godhead, kurvanti, do render, atma, self, prasadanim, that which enlivens. Certainly, therefore, since time immemorial, all transcendentalists have been rendering devotional service to Lord Krishna, the personality of Godhead, with great delight, because such devotional service is enlivening to the self. The speciality of devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, is specifically mentioned herein. Lord Sri Krishna is the Swayam Rupa, personality of Godhead, and all other forms of Godhead, beginning from Sri Baladeva, Sankarshana, Vasudeva, Aniruddha, Pradyumna, and Narayan, and extending to the Purusha avatars, Guna avatars, Lila avatars, Yuga avatars, and many other thousands of manifestations of the personality of Godhead, are Lord Sri Krishna's plenary portions and integrated parts. The living entities are separated parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna is the original form of Godhead, and he is the last word in the transcendence. Thus, he is more attractive to the higher transcendentalists who participate in the eternal pastimes of the Lord. In forms of the personality of Godhead other than Sri Krishna and Baladeva, there is no facility for intimate personal contact as in the transcendental pastimes of the Lord of Rajabhumi. The transcendental pastimes of Lord Sri Krishna are not newly accepted, as argued by some less intelligent persons. His pastimes are eternal and are manifested in due course once in a day of Brahmaji, as the sun rises on the eastern horizon at the end of every 24 hours. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, ISKCON's founder Acharya, and who has given us these commentaries in the Srimad Bhagavatam with the speaker of the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, to all the previous Acharyas, and to all the assembled devotees. Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhupi evacha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So the verse today begins with ato, or ataha, just like atato brahma jignasa, which is a therefore, a concluding point is about to be made. And the first, what comes before this is a description of the purificatory process that takes place when one engages in devotional service. There's service to the Vaishnavas, there's hearing about the Lord in the association of devotees, during which Krishna, who's within the heart, helps to purify us of anarthas. There's a liminal stage where one notices that the anarthas, the lower modes of nature, which can be perceived because of the pushings that come from qualities like anger or greed or lust, are diminishing. And then there's a time during which one realizes that they're absent. And one comes to a substantial position in devotional service called Shuddha Sattva. From that position, there's happiness within the mind. Evam prasanna manaso bhagavat bhakti yogata bhagavat tattva vijnana mukta sangha sajayate. And besides happiness, there's a clear understanding of one's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then it's known, we can know it from the progression of instructions in this paragraph, that one's connection to the material world is severed. Vidyate hridaya grantish chiddante sarva samshaya. All of one's doubts are eliminated, they're finished. Chiddante sarva samshaya shiyante chasya karmani drishtaiva manishvare. One's karma is finished, and there's a way in which one comes to clearly follow Krishna's path, to know that I'm not my body, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and one knows one's best interest. And then comes this verse, which is therefore. And here, ata means therefore, kaviyo nityam. Kaviyo means the devotees, also means kavis, highly learned persons. Krishna also calls himself kavi, kavim puranam, naiṣātiduḥsahā. Those who have come to the highest conclusion of life have given this path, and they have given this opinion, not just recently, but it's well known since a time immemorial. Nitya means this has been going on forever. Because the material world is manifested and unmanifested, as Krishna mentions in the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. It's coming and going, and he assures us that beyond the comings and goings of the material world, there's he has an eternal abode that's beyond this. And that's also nityam. It's always been there. And the opportunity for devotional service is always available. Bhaktim paramayā mudāh, that the devotees have been taking pleasure in this. It's not an arduous path of militant self-restraint. There are 2 words in the Shastra that have a similar meaning, but the difference is profound. One is tyaga, and the other is virakti. So tyaga means to give up some pleasurable object. And virakti means that one understands one's true self-interest and sees everything in the world as potential paraphernalia to be used in the service of the Lord. This is the path that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught, especially through the instructions given to us by the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Anasaktasya vishayan yathārham upayunjita nirbandha krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagyamuchite prapanchakataya buddhya hari-sambandhi vastuna mumukshabi parityagyo vairagyam palagukatyate. The kind of renunciation that depends on giving up sense objects that are still desired may not last. And on the other hand, there's a kind of renunciation which is positive, which means to view everything as paraphernalia to be used in the service of the Lord, including one's own senses. And when that sort of worldview arises in one's mind, then there's no sense of restraint, because it's positive engagement of the senses in the service of Krishna, who's known as Rishikesh. He's the master of the senses. And when one realizes that, Ishavasam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bunjita magrata kasiswadanam. Then while living in this world, one stays in one's lane. Tena tyaktena bunjita. The Lord has set aside this for me. And everything else, including whatever He set aside for me, but everything else that may seem desirable to me is meant to be engaged in the service of the Lord, because He's the supreme controller and owner of everything. If or when one has this idea, then everything that one has, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, manasa deho geho yo kichumor. He describes how he has some things. He has a house, manasa deho geho, he has a mind. He has family, he has some money. Then, of course, he has a body and he has a self. He is a self. And he says, all these things together on the spreadsheet, they all belong to you, Krishna. And I will therefore engage them in your service. And as it turns out, bhaktim paramayā mudāh. Paramayā means the supreme. When one's engaging all of one's paraphernalia, including one's senses, count that as paraphernalia. 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 When all of that is engaged in Krishna's service, bhaktim paramayā mudāh, then one feels happy. And last night, when we were at the Harinam Sankirtan, Janavi Jivana during a break, it was a short break, just between songs, said to the enthralled audience, she said, "Everyone come over to this side." He said, "Because we're having fun." And she said, "We're having fun over here." And I noticed the demarcation. There was those who were already signed up for the process. They're already well informed about what it is. And then there were others who were becoming informed. They were standing there in the amphitheater that is College Avenue. No one's ever mentioned that we block traffic, but I won't bring it up again. Those people were only divided from devotional service or being on the fun side. Of course, they were having fun too, but she was inviting them to come on over, literally just cross over and just sit down. And because paramayā mudāh, because it's fun. And nobody could deny that from direct observation. Because as I looked around, I was impressed by the brightness of the countenances of all the devotees. You can't fake that. If you're not happy, face is the index of the mind. Of course, sometimes devotees are grave. Once Prabhupada, a disciple asked Prabhupada about a photograph where he was grave, and Prabhupada said, "No, I was feeling ecstasy." But the devotees have fun. They said at Woodstock that nobody's come together like this before, a bunch of young people, millions of them, to have fun, and nothing but fun, the MC said at Woodstock. I'm quoting Woodstock, Raghav will appreciate it. And it didn't end up to be a lot of fun. It degraded into something else, without the details. But devotional service is always fun. It's nityam fun, nityam mudāh. It's been going on since the time immemorial. It's always going on in the spiritual world, where the festival is continuing, goes on despite whatever geopolitical events are taking place on the planet Earth. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentioned to Sanatana Goswami, if you look at the material world, you can conceive of it as a big sack of mustard seeds. And if you go to the spice market in India, you can see they're rather large, those sacks in the spice market. Big burlap sack full of mustard seeds. And if you were to ask AI to count all of them, it might explode. Even AI can't count how many mustard seeds are in a bag of mustard seeds. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said if one of those planets, just like if one mustard seed falls out from the bag, nobody really notices. So if one universe, each one of them represents a universe, if one of them fell out, no one would really notice. And so he said, what's one insignificant universe? What to speak of one insignificant planet? What to speak of those, says Bhumi, in the latter part of the Srimad Bhagavatam, as she observes, are quibbling, quarreling. Yeah, it's not really a quibble. I think it's above quarreling also. About various geographical lines, and she says they're only here for 5 minutes, as far as I can see. Why are they so concerned that they spill blood for whose resources they are? The devotees, on the other hand, are carefree because they've already signed everything over to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But it's not tyaga. It's virakti, because as they engage in this process, paramayā mudāh, of serving the Lord, they feel happiness, they feel pleasure. It's happier over on our side of the street because we get to engage directly in chanting the holy name. Or it may be happier on their side. Who knows? Because as we heard this morning, after the verse naiṣātiduḥsahā tyaktodam bādhate, pibantaṁ tvan-mukhāmbhoja, śrottawan hari-kathāmṛtam, then comes vāsudeva-kathā-praśnaḥ, puruṣāṁs trīn punāti, vaktāraṁ pracchakaṁ śrotទ្ធṁs. Last line? Huh? What? tat-pāda-salilaṁ yathā. This is the Ganges purifies the whole universe. So similarly, the sound vibration that comes from Krishna Katha or chanting Hare Krishna, it purifies three kinds of people. The people who are chanting, they get the most credit. That's there in the commentary. The one who's speaking or chanting, they get the most credit. If you want to get extra credit. Then next is the people who are listening. And third is everybody else who gets hit. As Nirākula's mother used to say, because she had a lot of kids, and they'd fight in the backseat of the car. And as she was driving, she'd say to him, if you don't settle down, in a moment I'm going to turn around and swing, and I don't care who I hit. Joan. And similarly, the holy name doesn't really care who he hits. If you're out on the avenue and you're chanting, he's gonna hit you. In fact, last night I was appreciating the dogs. I saw at least 3 dogs go by. And dogs are very loyal animals. They stick with their master. So they're out for a walk with their master or mistress. And as they walked along, the person just walked them by the Harinam. That's not our fault. They could have taken another route. And the dogs seemed a little taken aback by the sound vibration. But as they were going by, I was envisioning a sort of car wash where the soul goes through and the cycles unfold. And that animal, who's actually a spirit soul in a dog's body, got cleansed from hearing the sound vibration of the holy name. That's verified in the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. What could be more fun than that? Take your dog through the car wash. He walks by and a little dog, a little startled by the sound, but you're pulling him through, and he comes out with the holy name in his ears. Albeit dog ears, the holy name goes right to the soul. What to speak of the people who could envision fun? I was about to say this last night, but then the people whose car we were standing in front of said, "This is our car, get out of here." We were standing too close to their car, so they became disturbed. But I noticed that when the people were walking by, revelers they were, because they put on their best sharp casual, try to look like, I'm cool. And they're going off to talk and meet and observe and eat, and certainly this is the nature of the soul. You want to eat something, you want to hear something, you want to make a friendship, you want to talk. Nobody wants to just sit by themselves. In fact, even on an airplane, in order to keep people from going stir crazy, the airlines has put a television in front of every face so that people don't go crazy. They're already going crazy now. I don't know what happened. Somebody snapped. Collectively, there was a snapping. People are now berating each other for various petty reasons. But when people are reveling, going out for revelment, if there is such a word, and they're walking by, revelry, that's it. They're going by and they hear the holy name, there's an abruptness to the contrast. There's on one side the la-di-da-di-da, ha-ha-ha of the material world, which I once saw when I was on Govardhan Parikrama. Some of my happiest Govardhan Parikrams were when I was by myself. I just put a chadar over my head and go out and just walk. And free to walk and just chant and observe. When you go to Govardhan and you go do parikram, there's a lot of walking involved. It's about 14 miles to go all the way around. So you have enough time to think a bit while you're walking. It's like watching a movie. And one of the movies Krishna can show a devotee who does parikram is, here's what your life looks like, and here are the things that are holding you back, and I'll just help to erase them for you as you walk and chant. So devotees like that churning process. They're going around and around. After all, they end up in the same place they started from, so it's not like they're late for an appointment. They're just going so they can get a little mercy. So one day, when I was coming from Uddhavakund, walking towards Radhakund, there was a family on a flatbed rickshaw. And I didn't know who it was because I wasn't really looking around to notice things, but I couldn't help notice them because from behind me I heard boisterousness, laughter, hilarity. And when they passed me, I saw what the scene was, and that was that the rickshaw driver had abdicated his seat to the man who was head of the family there. And the man who had hired the rickshaw was sitting on the rickshaw seat pedaling the rickshaw. And the kids and apparently his wife were all sitting in the back of the flatbed rickshaw, pretty much piled in. And that was funny because there was a reversal of roles. Can you see how funny that might be? Anyway, they were laughing, and as they passed me, I just noted it, and I kept walking with my head down. And then after 2 minutes, I didn't hear anything. It just stopped suddenly. And then it was replaced with some wailing. And then as I looked up, I saw some of the locals had run over to the side of the road, which had a steep embankment. And in India, you really don't want to go down an embankment. There's lots of stuff down there, minus the details. I'll just say there's stickers, definitely sticker bushes down there, but there's other stuff. And so the family in their revelry, at least the driver, perhaps he wasn't so experienced driving a flatbed rickshaw, well, not watching where he was going, but somehow or other he went over the edge. And they tumbled, all of them. Nobody was seriously injured, but quite startled, and they probably would have preferred not to have gone over that edge. As many observers who looked aghast down the gully that thought, I would prefer not to do that. And the hilarity turned into weal and woe and exclamations of how could have this have happened. And it just registered in my mind how the material world can turn from so-called happiness into a sense of weal and woe within a second. But the kind of happiness that comes from devotional service is achieved through maturity, through the process that is described previously, that one attends to one's spiritual practice carefully and is elevated to a level of happiness that is one's birthright, one's constitutional nature, but it's achieved through the practice of devotional service, seriously attending to hearing and chanting in the association of devotees, then atovai kavayon nityam bhaktim paramayā mudāh. Then one who is connected to the eternal happiness that comes from devotional service has many benefits. One is that he or she is no longer compelled to engage in the kind of activities that are advertised as happiness, but which Prahlāda Maharaj asked the question about. Kutrāśisha shuti sukham mrigatrishni rupa kvedam kalevaram ashesham rajam viroha. He says that, where is it? Where is the happiness in this material world? He said everybody talks about it, but nobody actually achieves it. Kutra, where is that? Kutrāśisha. There's some benediction offered again and again, but one never gets it. It's a waiting game, and one waits throughout one's lifetime, doesn't get it, waits through another lifetime, doesn't get it. One can continue that cycle forever until one comes in contact with devotional service. Otherwise, Prahlāda says it's like a mirage. You keep chasing it and you think you're going to get water, but you never get it. So this verse is triumphal in the sense that there is a process, there is such a thing as happiness, paramayā mudāh, it's there in the parama, in the Supreme Personality of Godhead and our connection with Him. And better to come over to this side and remember that hanging out in the material world, you'll end up in a gully somewhere with sticker bushes and a lot of other stuff. However, if you come over to Krishna's side, take Janavi Jivana's advice. Why don't you all come over here? And that's all we're saying. Radha Krishna bolo shange cholo e matra bhikacha. It's the only thing we're asking. And then why don't you all come over here? Because we're happy. And we have a process that is well thought out. It's expressed eloquently, philosophically, and there's a practical aspect that one can experience for oneself, pratyakshavāgamam dharmyam, that it's directly experienced. In fact, the happiness in the material world, last thing I'll say, for a minute, the happiness in the material world is called manasa pratyaksha. It means that everything you think you're experiencing is only through the medium of your mind. You're not actually touching it. You're only watching it in your mind, but there's no attraction, there's no contact with the objects themselves. It's an imagined happiness. And that's why Prahlāda calls it a mirage. There's no substance to it. You never actually get it. You perceive it in your mind, but that doesn't mean that you're experiencing it directly. It means indirectly you're watching and imagining that it's some kind of happiness. Manasa pratyaksha, directly experienced but through the mind. So devotional service is different in that you directly experience it. Paramayā mudāh. One feels nourished and uplifted on the level of one's soul. Now we'll take, will means me, we, some reflections or questions. Yes, Devavrata Prabhu.
When you were speaking about the coming to the other side, I was thinking of a verse from Bibala Mangala Thakur, where he says, Avaitavitir parikara pasya svanandasim mamsana labda diksha satena kenapi vayam hatena dasikrita gopa vadu vitena that I was situated on the path of Advaita, and I was initiating on that path. I was initiated, and I was initiating, and it seemed that everything was fine and happy, but then this boy named Gopal tricked me, and dasikrita gopa vidu vitena, and now he's engaged me in his service, helplessly.
That reminds me of Rupa Goswami's admonition, don't go down to the Jamuna by Keshi Ghat. Don't go there, because Krishna's there. And if you see him in the moonlight playing on his flute, then your material life is finished. Don't cross over. Don't come. Kanka. Do we have enough air? What is the oxygen? We should get a little meter that tells how much oxygen is actually in the air. And we could keep it at a very high level. This should be like an oxygen tent in here. That's the secret. I've seen it before. Go ahead, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the class. It was really nice. I love this verse. It's a really awesome verse. But as I was listening to Srila Prabhupada this morning, I was thinking, it's so wonderful because he was really emphasizing at the time in this class that when we're in the temple and when we're practicing devotional service, we are actually in the spiritual world. It's not material. And I was thinking about the Hari-Nam party last night, how amazing that Prabhupada's made it available that the devotees are taking the spiritual world out to the University Avenue. So incredible. So, Jai Nitai, Jai Chaitanya Nitai.
Haribol. Okay, Vaikuntha Nayaka, live from Mysore. We can read lips, but I can't see you closely enough to read lips.
Oh, Hare Krishna Maharaj. I think now I am audible, I guess.
Yes.
So you are talking about the mirage-like state that of happiness that Prahlad Maharaj mentions. I was reminded of it's a famous motion picture called The Pursuit of Happiness. And there, actually Will Smith, the character, he says that, okay, the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence, they guaranteed life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They didn't. So he was wondering, how did they know? They said life, liberty, but not happiness. They said that, okay, we'll give you the freedom to pursue the pursuit of happiness, but not happiness. So it's a bit sobering to know that the founding fathers knew the nature of the material world. But if only they had the Srimad Bhagavatam, maybe they would have said that, okay, life, liberty, and happiness through Bhagavatam. That's it now. Thank you. Thank you.
It's a brilliant point. It also indicates that people may be aware that happiness is elusive in the material world. It's just that they don't have enough information to come in contact with the source of that mirage. I mean, if there's a mirage, it means there's real water somewhere. Otherwise, there's no idea of mirage. Just like if you have counterfeit money, there has to be real money. There's no meaning to counterfeit. So if we are in pursuit of happiness, it means it must be somewhere. Just like if you're thirsty and you're pursuing water, it's an indication, or we notice logically that there's a counterpart to each one of our desires. And if we're pursuing happiness, it means happiness is available. That's good to know. Then the study of happiness is important. In the Nectar of Devotion we find, as Prabhupada points out, Rupa Goswami notes there are levels of happiness. One is so-called material happiness, which is no happiness at all, or he gives this concession that if you're in the desert and you need water, and somebody mercifully or apparently mercifully, comes along and says, I'll give you water, but it only gives you one drop. You can't deny that it's water, but it's not enough. So he says that's the material level. Then there's the happiness of Brahman, which is millions of times more favorable than material happiness. But Brahman happiness, in some sense, is more of a relief from suffering. It says, you were in debt and you had to work hard to pay it off, and there was no end in sight, but then someone came and paid off your whole debt. And then you feel relieved. But that's not a positive happiness, it's more a relief from suffering. But when one comes to one's relationship with Krishna, then one experiences ever-increasing happiness, which is by multiples greater than the happiness of Brahman pleasure. If we observe the world, which the Shastra invites us to do, as a reflection of the spiritual world, we can understand that there is a pursuit of happiness, and one might argue that the pinnacle of happiness anywhere in the material world, starting with the material world, is to have loving relationships. Prabhupada points this out, that this is the impetus to work hard in the material world. That's why he says, Prabhupada said, an economics professor of his pointed out that unless there was family life, there'd be no Home Depot. My commentary, because the impetus to work hard in the material world and do whatever one has to do in the form of earning money is to have a loving relationship with family. And there are other ways that one might notice that songs and poems and novels are generally interested because of the relationships. And this is the opinion also of our Shastra, that the ultimate happiness is in a loving relationship. But with whom? When we have a loving relationship in the material world, there's necessarily a beginning and an end. Sometimes it's based on a hormonal rush that one perceives the unassailable beauty of another, and that takes place in all species of life. However, when the hormonal rush is finished, one comes down to a more basic kind of relationship, or not end or just end, the relationship will terminate at some point for various reasons. However, if one reposes one's love in Krishna, the promise is that that relationship and the love will be ever increasing. And imagine if you reposed your love in a perfect person who never gets old, or your relationship never gets old. It just gets newer and newer. And that's the happiness of devotional service. So in analyzing happiness, we can see there are various levels. One is so-called happiness, another is a happiness of relief from the struggle of the material world, which Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says is kind of like being on a dunking board, and then when you're pulled out of the water, you get to take a breath and you think, oh, now I'm happy. But real happiness means to reunite with our relationship with Krishna. And is that Yashoda? Yashoda Kripa?
Yes, Maharaj. Hare
Please.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, a couple of things I am taking back from this verse today. I've been thinking for the past few minutes. And first of all, this verse kind of repeats the previous message. Save pumsam parodharma. It says, Yatma suprasidati, brings complete satisfaction to the self. And this verse also says the same thing, that devotional service is enlivening to the self. So that's my first key takeaway. And the second thing is that caught my attention is rendering devotional service with great delight. So there are times, rendering devotional service could mean either we are chanting on beads or doing kirtan, book distribution, preaching, giving class, or deity worship, all of those different phases, right? And there tends to be sometimes multiple reasons like peer pressure or competition against other people, or just keeping myself in the center because I think I'm the karta hamiti manyate. And then there is no delight left in that anymore. It's just because external reasons I'm performing certain things, material reasons probably. But then the devotional service has to be performed with the great delight, then which is basically should be coming from my inside, my own motivation, and then it will bring the real enlivenment. That's just my reflection from this verse. Thank you.
Do you want me to say anything about it? That? Or
No, I
leave
just
it at that?
I just felt
Well, I will
motivated
say
to
something about
feel
it,
my heart
even though you
about
didn't ask a question. But it's an astute observation, and it's an important one, because although we hear with great delight, there will be a time during which we may not feel that. And that period is an interim period that one must endure and tolerate. And that's true with a disease. When you have a disease and you get the cure, it doesn't mean you're going to be cured right away and experience the result. You have to be vigilant in taking the medicine until you're cured. And when you're cured, then you can experience for yourself that you're back to your natural state. And it's similar in devotional service, and it's an important note that you're making, because once one dedicates oneself to the process of devotional service, one may notice that there are delimiting factors and that come from our own impurities. And we may note also that this verse, and I think that's one of the things you're pointing out, comes at the conclusion of the process, that one has gone through the purification and continued to hear and chant. However, I have also noticed that if one fortifies one's intelligence regarding the path of devotional service, as Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, evam buddhi param buddhva samstabhyatmanam jahi shatram mahabhaho kamarupam durasadam. Arjuna's question in the Gita was, why is it that I'm overcome, even though I may know better, by the forces of nature, especially kama, which is given definition, Prabhupada gives definition to in one of his purports. He says kama, or lust, is a desire that cannot be fulfilled. So that's important to know. And then at the end of the chapter, Krishna says, study this, note it, and move forward initially by your intelligence. And it's not that there's no taste in that. When one does the right thing, there's a taste in that. Because the alternative is that I notice that I'm being dominated by my senses to do something that I don't really want to do. When one's intelligence is awakened, one may think, I know what the right thing is. And if you're able to, through good association and having a clear, defined path to follow, you do it even though you're not taking great delight directly in the process. You may feel some delight, or at least a sense of integrity, which warms your heart, that, oh, I'm doing the right thing. And that can be fortifying as we continue the standard process of devotional service before it becomes a great delight. There was a couple more questions. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I have a reflection, Guru Maharaj. I also want to appreciate Harinam yesterday. I was distributing books and I never felt like people were very joyful, and the response, like I was really feeling that they will read the books, because many times when we go out on books and give them, I'm fully not sure that if they will read. This time, they were so joyful to hear Harinam, and when I was explaining that these books explain this process and everything, they were really into it, and I felt that they will really read it, and it was one of the best Harinams.
Harinam and book distribution go together quite nicely. As people can have a breakthrough in their lives right on the sidewalk. They can find religion right there on the sidewalk. And then there's a book to follow up on it. That's ideal. It's a nice observation. Thank you. Shraddha?
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for the wonderful lecture today. I just wanted to expand on the wonderful point that Vaikuntha Nayak Prabhu raised on the pursuit of happiness and the Declaration of Independence. And he had mentioned that he was glad that our forefathers or the founding fathers knew about this concept. And so I was just looking up here on the internet, and it said that the pursuit of happiness means the individual has the right to seek personal well-being, purpose and fulfillment. And it reflects the Enlightenment ideals, especially those of the philosopher John Locke, who originally wrote about life, liberty and property. Thomas Jefferson replaced property with the pursuit of happiness to emphasize a broader, more moral and spiritual kind of well-being and not just material wealth. And I was just thinking that earlier in the class you had talked about tyaga as one of the things. And so that's what Thomas Jefferson was also thinking at the same time, right? It's not just don't go after the material world, go after the real happiness. Yeah.
I think these points could be put into a shortened form and used for presentation when we're distributing books. Sometimes these are very thoughtful points codified. If you present them to people, I noticed that they suddenly become less restless when we're, for instance, hand them a book, we're talking to them somewhere, their mind calms down when you have a philosophical point that they can wrap their mind around. And I could envision something like that with this, that John Locke talked about life, liberty, and property, and how, what's his name? Thomas Jefferson then had changed the word to pursuit of happiness, and that could be integrated into a presentation of a book, and then talk about how this book discusses the different levels of happiness and what it takes to pursue those, and what the return on one's investment of time and energy in those pursuits are. That could be something. Okay, yes, you're next.
Hare Krishna Gurudev, thank you so much for such a wonderful class. One thing I noticed last night was during the Harinam, there was a father and a little boy, and both were walking by fast. But first the little boy stopped, so the father had to stop. And then the little boy wanted to go, but the father told the little boy to wait. And I just thought it was so interesting that there was some reluctance initially from both of them, but they couldn't help but stop. And they're of different ages, attracted by different things, but it's almost like they were forced to stop, and they walked away, but it's just the magnetic show-stopping energy of the holy name. So yeah. I thought that was very nice. And I also had a quick follow-up to Yashoda Kripa Prabhu's question. I thought it was a very nice and pertinent question. And I was wondering, do you have like a sutra that we could say to ourselves when we're doing service and we feel our ego getting in the way, or we feel it difficult to cooperate? How can we calm our mind and better tolerate the mind in that situation? So, if I understood your question, follow-up question correctly, based on the observation of Yashoda Kripa that there may be some resistance to fully embracing Krishna consciousness, and you had pointed out there may be very specific things. You had pointed out two things. One was maybe a sense of envy. Was that it? Perhaps, yeah. Yeah, how did you say it? I said ego, but I think envy and ego can kind of go together.
Ego, can you say more about the egoic part of the practice that slows you down?
I think that like thinking I am the controller and forgetting I'm insignificant.
And what was the other obstacle?
Cooperation. Sometimes even if I'm cooperating externally, internally I might be disturbed.
So one sutra I got from Vrajabihari Prabhu that I keep in my mind and sometimes write and sometimes say out loud is, you never lose credit by giving credit where credit is due. That is one, it's a wrestling move with the false ego, because the false ego goes, and then he'll like, here's an armbar for you, my dear false ego, that you know you never lose credit by giving credit where credit is due. And it gives pause to the ego that let me give credit to others. And that observation leads me to think about how people interact and how they appreciate one another. People generally don't appreciate braggarts or those who point out their own glories. They generally appreciate those who do their service without expecting any recognition, but everyone recognizes them anyway. And Mahaprabhu noticed in an assembly with parishads from the spiritual world and avatars in the room, a humble woman who attended to many of the affairs of the house, in Srivas Thakur's house, who was very diligently bringing pots of water for the abhishekam. And she was in the back, but he noticed her first and gave her a new name. Her name was Duki, but she said, now your name is Suki. I don't know who gave her the name Duki, but it was a childhood thing. So that's one thing, is to remember, and also to remember that I'm not the supreme controller. I once had a difficult situation in a business transaction, and it concerned me so much that I was in anxiety. And I called a mentor who was doing the same business actually, but he's a respected devotee. And the first thing he said to me is, well, you're not the supreme controller. And I was amazed how that one statement had cleared my anxiety. It's like, hey, yeah, I'm not the supreme controller. That's helpful. And it's not a sutra per se, but it's a verse. I was in another, of course, my life is a series of anxiety-filled episodes. But in one such, I was really concerned because I was helping to manage a project, and there was a lawsuit, and the insurance apparently wasn't going to cover it. And I mean, I don't want to go into all the details, but I had to give a little bit of context. And I just couldn't see a way around it. So I was looking for some shelter. I went to talk to some senior godbrothers who happened to be in town, and one of them said, well, yeah, it'll probably be okay. And I was driving home thinking, that didn't do anything for me. And then one of them, 3 days later, sent me a verse from the Bhagavatam, and that did something for me. I noticed it myself. I read the verse. It was about Prithu Maharaj, who had been under attack by Indra because Prithu Maharaj was going to perform 100 horse sacrifices. He was on 99, ready to do 100. And Indra thought, I'm the one who did 100. I'm not going to let him do that. So he interfered with the yajna 3 times in really silly and disgusting ways, if I may be so bold. And then Prithu Maharaj understandably became incensed, and he wanted to kill him. The priests who were there performing the yajna on his behalf said, no, you can't kill him, but we can. So we'll do an incantation that pulls him into the fire, and we'll kill him for you. And then Brahma came and said, no, Indra's a devotee, you can't kill him. And you've all gotten too absorbed and caught up in this. And then he spoke these words about how when something's providential, you shouldn't stress over it so much, because these things come and go in everybody's life. It was a very straightforward instruction, but as soon as I heard it, and I read the purport, and Prabhupada starts off by saying, we may note that even very highly religious people may have to go through troubles and reversals and so forth. And I gave up my anxiety, and to this day, I thank that godbrother for sending it to me, because he read it and he thought, this might resonate, and he sent it across. So if you're ever thinking about sending a note to a godbrother, godsister, or an associate, don't hesitate, because it could change their lives. I'll tell you another one. I had a godbrother who had become wayward in devotional service. And one thing I've noted is if you live longer, or the more you live, you see that people come and go. So you don't become disturbed when people go, or when of course you're joyful when they come back, but because of this principle, paramayā mudāh, people do come back to devotional service, even if they deliberately get off the path. And I had a very close friend, godbrother, who deliberately got off the path for 20 years. And somehow I kept in touch with him over time. The reason I bring this up was because I'm clearing out. Nirākula and I are going through this process of getting rid of everything that we don't need right now, and trying to get uncluttered completely. So I was going through a lot of papers. That's mostly what is the clutter. Boxes and boxes of notes. And I found this paper that I had sent to a godbrother maybe 30 years ago, because he had gotten a fax machine, and I had a fax machine, which is really cutting-edge, high technology. And he said, I want to test it out. So could he send me something? And I had been studying this verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita that says that anyone who thinks that performing 1 trillion Ashwamedha yagas on the confluence of the Ganges and the Jamuna during the eclipse of the sun is equal to chanting one time Hare Krishna is an atheist doomed to go to hell. I thought that was a nice verse to present, maybe at corporate events or something. And so I just had it on my desk, and he said, fax me something. I said, when are we going to fax him? So I made a note on it, and I put it through the fax machine, and about a week later I got a 8-page handwritten letter from him saying, oh, how unfortunate I am. I gave up a great jewel, threw it in the gutter. And I didn't intend that. It just happened. And I just found the paper again as forensic evidence that it was dated and the whole thing of when I had sent it. So it's a good question you ask. What are the sutras we carry with us? We should have them ready. The affirmation, a sutra, to remember what actually our position is in the material world. We can enjoy unlimitedly through the process of devotional service, but we have to navigate our way through the various desires and obstacles. I'll take one last question. There was, yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
So earlier you were speaking about how when one reaches the Shuddha Sattva platform, they're able to realize that anarthas are absent and they find happiness within. So I was wondering, like, we see this mood in great devotees where they're speaking about how fallen they are out of their great humility, especially like Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his songs speaking about how he's a sinner. So how do we kind of reconcile that? How do we understand that mood?
It's an aspect of a melted heart that one sees one's own faults. Simultaneously, one doesn't see the faults of others. that's indicative of bhava, says Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in the 9 symptoms of bhava that he mentions to Sanatana Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. One is that one becomes more self-critical, but it's different from lack of self-esteem, in which one says, "Oh, I'm nothing, and I'm nobody, and I'm depressed, and I might as well not even show up." It's motivating to the devotee to do more service, and it's relishable in a way. It's called dainya, and it comes naturally for one whose heart is melting. We have an eternal relationship with Krishna. Shara chakshara evacha, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. There's the eternally perfect and those who are eternally not perfect. Although those who are fully engaged in devotional service, they are perfect, but still there's that sense that I'm the part and Krishna's the whole, and one can find such a person can then experience one's potential as not perfect. That's an explanation given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Sanatana Goswami. And in another way, as we discussed the other night when we were talking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur and his so-called admission of these faults, it's also didactic in that he can catalog as a person who's overcome, not just overcome, but who's above those. He can observe it and then point it out. And it's very helpful to have a catalog, because as he's expressing it, like he says, I'm always speaking lies. Sada mitya, how's that go? Mitya bashi. Mitya bashi. There's different kinds of speech. And mitya means false speech, means lies. So he says that that's my nature, I'm always speaking lies. And one may then become circumspect upon hearing all these catalogs of things like, oh, I have that, I have this, I have that. And that's somehow relishable. I pointed that out when we read it the other night during Bhaktivinoda Thakur's disappearance, that when we hear that catalog, we become aware of it and think, I have that, and I have that. Yes, check. I have all those things. It's counterintuitive, but it's kind of relishable. And the acharyas point those things out. Even Krishna points them out with their divine and demoniac qualities. And just hearing about them can be helpful by being aware of them then, and one may feel inspired to develop the exalted qualities. Those are 2 points that can help to understand that phenomena of Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaking about his so-called faults. And now we're moving on. Just as a repeat of the verse, Ato vai kavayo nityam bhaktim paramayā mudāh vāsudeva-kathā-praśnaḥ kurvantyatma prasadatim. That's one who's engaged in the process of devotional service, does so joyfully. And that's because of prasadatim, the mercy of Krishna, comes to those who are engaged in devotional service, and it's a happy, happy life. And the Sankirtan movement is the Kevala Anandakanda. Proof positive last night. Everybody who was there felt transported from College Avenue to the Vaikuntha. We could have stayed all night. And it's especially sweet when there's an outside audience through whom one can vicariously appreciate their first encounter with the holy name, if it is their first. And that's what makes the Sankirtan movement so joyful also. When we go out on book distribution and introduce people to Krishna consciousness, then we see through their eyes, meaning of vicarious, the joy of Krishna consciousness, or awakening to Krishna consciousness, or even the potential of awakening, even if somebody is reluctant, but somehow or other they agree, and they take the book, put it in their car or house. Then we're left when we go home to imagine what the effects might be. And perhaps they will be revealed to us at some point. If you can imagine, when you leave this world, people who have had near-death experiences sometimes say that they saw their whole world, their whole life flash before their eyes. There was a person in Los Angeles who was a military, and when he died temporarily and then came back, and people asked him, what was it like? He said, I saw my whole life pass before my eyes. That's cliche. But then he explained it. He said it was like a mosaic. I was looking at one picture, but all the individual aspects of everything I had done in my life were in that mosaic. He said, it's hard to explain because it was beyond time. And imagine when you give your entire life to the process of Krishna consciousness, how every experience of this happiness, like the kirtan last night, that you have, or walking in the deity room with some sweet rice at night to offer to the deity, there's no other earthly experience that can compare to that, of worshiping the deity, putting the deity to rest. Or the gratitude that one feels for one's relationships with devotees. Just naming the ways in which we feel this mudāh, or this happiness, we could be here all day if we took comments from everybody, starting with A, then B, then C, then D. And all of that will come to bear at the time of death. When we leave this body, the force of all that engagement in devotional service, which is uplifting to the soul, and that prasad that's coming down, the mercy that's coming down from Krishna, will carry us to the most favorable destination by Krishna's arrangement, where we can go on engaging in happy devotional service with others. And we can see in this very community that there's a lot of, there's souls coming into the Sankirtan movement. And what do they get? Well, first of all, mostly they get to hear the whole Srimad Bhagavatam before they even come out of the womb. Because that's what most mothers do here. And what are you doing these days? I'm reading the whole Srimad Bhagavatam to my baby in the womb. So that little child's in the womb hears the whole Bhagavatam and then comes out and everyone's going, Haribo, Haribo, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And you can see that they've been propelled by Krishna into the Kevala Anandakanda yet again. And that's the destination for those who are engaged in this lifetime, is then to be given an appropriate, or even more than, I'd say more than appropriate, Krishna reciprocates devotional service in multiples. So one may get way more than one thought one deserved by serving Krishna. And that's another cause for being happy, is when one works for a particular corporation, you're expecting at a certain point that they're going to say, you got to go, and they might not even say thank you. They might just say, you have 15 minutes and get out of here. We don't want to see you again, and give us back everything and all the passwords and all that. But Krishna doesn't do that. So one who's engaged in the practice of devotional service can anticipate an unlimited source of happiness. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Sri Panchatattva, Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan, Sri Sri Lakshmi Nrsimhadev, if you so desire, please let us increase the frequency and intensity of our Harinam Sankirtans. Please let us increase the volume of the distribution of Srimad Bhagavatam and all the other books that we have in store. Please let us increase our loving exchanges with all the devotees, because we're all going back to the spiritual world in a handbasket together. Thank you for considering it's the opposite of the other thing. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part, please say Hare Krishna. And now we have Kṣun's grain ceremony. That's a big deal. I should have worn green, apparently. We got to be color-coded next time. So guess what? We had a beautiful grain ceremony. It's going to take place in 3 minutes. So if you want to take time to stand up and then sit back down again, you got 3 minutes. We'll get a kirtan going, and then we're going to offer Kṣun some grains. Hare Krishna. Pācchakaṁ kripasinabhe vacha patitānaṁ pāvanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha nantakoti vaishnavini ki jai.